I'm good. All right, let's hop straight into it. Glad to have you. Very
Glad,
excited.
glad for you to extend the invite.
Awesome. Let's hop straight into the questions. So, what does mental health look like in your life?
So for me, I was in that weird stage where mental health still had a big stigma with my parents. My parents immigrated here in the 90s, so mental health wasn't really something that their parents really had a conversation with them about. So when it came time for them to become parents and have that conversation, they weren't the most equipped for it. So they only knew how to have that conversation based off of stereotypes. So for me, it wasn't something I was able to really find myself figuring out for myself until adulthood, until I started college, until I was able to have like counseling resources from either NJCU when I was an undergrad or NYU as a grad student. And then from there, it became my personal choice to seek therapy because I'm a firm believer that in order to be the best version of yourself, you have to make sure that you take care of yourself mentally.
So, you worked at the Ali Leadership Institute as director of curriculum, also a part of its first cohort, aiming to help mold a program that the next generation of civic leaders and activists can use to help accomplish positive political growth in their community. So, can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, sure. So I think it was 2 years ago now. I was first asked to help write curriculum when I had applied for the volunteer position. And like you mentioned, I was in the first cohort. But what was different for me was that I wasn't able to finish the first cohort. I had a different fellowship in the summer that I ended up choosing to do because it was overseas and I wanted to be able to study abroad. So when I had the opportunity to be the director of curriculum, it was a moment for me to decide, well, I know that there are a bunch of programs that exist that tackle civic engagement, that tackle building skills for youth to really engage in politics and trying to figure out where they could go from there. I wanted to be able to emulate the best that I was able to do in different kinds of programs, but bring it closer to like New Jersey and Jersey City specifically.
So, as you know, many things can affect mental health, and one of those in particular, and ever so more important, is housing safety and health. You are a very outspoken activist and member of your community, with your advocacy mainly focusing on tenant advocacy and education, along with the right to counsel. Can you tell us a little bit about how this in particular topic is so why it's so important to you?
This topic's important to me because there, for me, I personally believe there's a direct correlation between houselessness and um mental services and the affliction it could have on one's mental health. If you're constantly in a state of panic, in a state of fear of not being able to afford your home, not being able to afford to pay your bills, not being able to afford to, provide for yourself for something that's considered a basic need. Shelter is considered to be a basic human need. And if you can't afford to provide that for yourself, you're going to be in a state of panic where you're uncertain about what's going to happen next. You don't know if you're going to get evicted either the next day where you're going to get that notice or you're going to be evicted at the end of the month. So it's that uncertainty that really takes its mental toll. And I like to say that it's a policy issue because there are different kind of policies that should exist to ensure that one, people have the services that would be able to help them find that care, that would also be able to help them stay housed, and would also make sure that they have those educational needs met too, so they don't find themselves in a scenario where they may not be able to afford their rent because it just skyrocketed by 30%, or they might not be able to afford to talk to any kind of counseling or therapy or to seek any kind of class in order for them to try and figure out the next steps of getting mental services. So for me, it's all about trying to figure out ways that really removes that financial burden that really prohibits people from staying housed and getting the services they deserve to have.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the organizations you worked with while advocating for these specific topics?
Sure. So, like you mentioned, when I was organizing with Right to Counsel, was doing a lot of work with North New Jersey DSA, doing a lot of work with the Progressive Democrats of Hudson County, doing a lot of amazing work with Voters of Tomorrow, New Jersey, and trying to figure out how to combine all these different organizations to have, uh, uh, for lack of a better term, like um not a compromise, but I guess like an overlapping area where we all recognize that these are issues that everyone in our communities are facing, and now it's time that we work together to figure out how we could branch out these solutions.
Awesome, awesome. VLT bestie. Now you worked as council assistant to Jersey City Councilman Rolando Lavara. I hope I said his last name right, as well as on his campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about the work you achieved in this surrounding the addressing of housing or mental health initiatives during that time?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest proponents that Councilman Lavaro ran on and was working on before he sought reelection was affordable housing in Jersey City. Towards the last year of his tenure on the city council, there was something called an inclusionary zoning ordinance, which pretty much covered how much affordable housing new developments were allowed to hold in the buildings that were being built. So the one that ended up being proposed and ended up being voted upon was one that was full of loopholes. It only allowed as little as 5% affordable housing in new developments, and most of these developments were luxury housing. So a lot of these housing opportunities were being catered to a demographic of people that don't really call Jersey City their home. There are people that want to immigrate to Jersey City, which is all fine and dandy. But if you're not intentionally making sure that people that have lived in this city for 20, 30 years, or people that currently live here have proper rent control or have proper means of being able to stay housed or stay in their homes, then you're clearly saying that you're not really creating laws that are for the people that live here. You're creating people that you want to live here. So that was one of the battles that we tried tackling head on to show the difference of what we wanted to have, which was 20%, because that was the state minimum. And we wanted to show that 20% is way more than 5%. 20% affordable housing across the board is much more important than parking garages, more important than government buildings, because those were some of the loopholes that developers were allowed to build instead of affordable housing. So that was one way that we wanted to show that as a city council person, this is a policy stance that we should be taking but aren't taking. And as it pertains to mental health services, more times than not, we got people that were calling, emailing us, telling us that they were concerned about their rent. They were concerned about if they'd be able to even stay in Jersey City for 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks, and just trying to connect them with whatever resources that we knew that the city was providing or the county was providing, to make sure that if they felt like they were vulnerable, that push comes to shove, that these are resources that they could rely on, even if they may not be what we envision a city to use for mental health reasons. Making sure that people felt that they were being addressed when they were in their most dire.
Now, you are also a published author. You have a few op-eds on NJ.com. I just want to read a quote of one you released before. It shouldn't take having political interests or connections to the city you built your livelihood in to be in to know the extent this administration takes to avoid doing their due diligence. Is this something you still hold close with you on your campaign?
Oh, this is something that I hold close with me every day, even before I launched my campaign. Like I said earlier, a lot of what happens in Hudson County politics and Jersey City politics are a point of policy initiatives and the lack of it. So it's something that when I do talk to everyday people, when I do talk to friends and family, it's a reminder that there are certain ways that government should be functioning to empower us, to empower everyday people. And that's not how it's functioning right now. And that's truly what I carry with me every day as I talk to new people, as I uh, work to make sure that I get on the ballot and things like that, to remind people that we should have mental health services that are funded by the county. We should have services that allow us to stay in our homes, to stay housed in Hudson County. And the fact that we don't have those kinds of policies at the moment just goes to show that our county officials aren't doing their due diligence.
Now, you ran for county commissioner before, and you were up for your second race. Is there anything new that we can look forward in this race? Any new changes, any new policies or platforms?
So this is my first time running for county commissioner. I ran for county committee 2 years ago. So yeah, absolutely. There are definitely new policy initiatives, mostly because when I first ran for county committee, I was just transitioning from my first master's program. I was a student in international relations, and when the primary had just ended, I just got accepted to NYU Wagner for public policy. So I'm a part-time grad student. So one of the things that I could say has changed in the last 2 years is my depth of policy knowledge in trying to figure out how do we tackle different policy perspectives? How do we make sure that it can be funded properly where we don't hemorrhage money from our county dollars from the yearly budget, to make sure that we stay in line with that, to make sure that everything that we put together not only makes sense, but is also legal. So again, something that I wasn't really able to touch upon before, which was mental health, is something that I can now have a full-fledged platform on. Things like making sure that we have access to safe abortion and to try to bring Hudson County their first Planned Parenthood location. That's something that you can't really do with a seat as small as county committee, but with a seat like county commissioner that holds a seat in one of 9 districts, you can absolutely be creative in that sense to say that if we want to bring that kind of policy, if we want to bring those kinds of initiatives for women's reproductive health, then by all means, we should be able to do that.
All right. Well, is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you so much for the invitation, Jeremiah. Like, it means the world to me that you're doing something so important, trying to tackle the conversations about mental health and what we need to do as a community and what we need to do as organizers to try and not only get rid of the stigma, but have those important conversations on how we could tackle this in a government perspective, in an organizing capacity, and as everyday people. And what I want to say about that is that it's never too late to have those conversations. It's never too late to try and educate yourself and others. And it's never too late to take that first step in trying to find mental clarity for yourself. Because, like I said earlier, in order for you to be your best self, to be the best version of yourself, you have to make sure that you're mentally healthy. And the best way to do that is to be able to try and figure out where those resources are, and to try and figure out if those resources don't exist, how do we build for it? How do we build coalition to make sure that it's not just here for ourselves, but it's here for everyone else that's also struggling but doesn't know where to turn yet? Making sure that we build for others that are struggling in silence, because more times than not, people are struggling every day with mental health issues, but they just don't have that outlet. They don't know where exactly they can go. And what we're doing now is just making sure that no one has to feel that struggle anymore. So making sure that we could build towards that, whether it's with policy, whether it's with organizing, whether it's just trying to give back in the community in whatever way that we can, with whatever skills that we have, with whatever resources we have, to make sure that our tomorrow is better than the today or yesterday that we had, is is the most dignifying work. And I'm so proud of you for it, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Yes, no, I'm very happy to have you here and during this conversation, touching on topics that not many want to talk about. Well, thank you for joining us today on this amazing and our first episode of New Jersey Youth Talks Backseat Time. It was a pleasure having you, and I look forward to watching your race as it transpires.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be the first episode.